What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Grab Your Torch with Kaleb and Joel. We are back to talk about Survivor 48. After we had kind of a
Yes.
boring episode on Wednesday, we're just here to talk about our top seven winner rankings. This is based on how we think these players are going to stack up compared to winning, not necessarily their power rankings, who's going to go home next week. This is talking purely about who we think is going to win. And we'll start at the bottom, alternate picks, and get to the top, and we'll talk about each of them along the way. So, would you like to lead us off at number seven?
Yes, number seven, I have Mary. I don't see any combination of a final three that she could win. I think she gets an easy vote from David. She would probably get one from Cedric as well. But
Maybe.
maybe, whoever Say tells Cedric to vote for her. But I don't think Mary has much of a shot to even get here. The fact that she almost got voted out this week by itself when she's not much of a threat to anyone speaks a lot. Because she's kind of like that. Yeah, we don't want to take a shot right now. Let's just vote out Mary. Like she's that option. And so I don't think it's likely she even really makes it. And let alone like I don't see a world where she like beats any of them. But what are
Yeah.
your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I have Mary a tad higher, but I'd say she probably has like a 5% chance of winning at most. Like that's her ceiling. So I just don't really see any, outcome where she has a chance to win. I don't know if she has people that she can sit next to and convince the jury to win either. Just at this point in time, there's too many people that have a lot stronger cases than her. And she's been on the bottom for a while. She's been on the bottom pretty much the entire season. And so hopefully that she can pull off some interesting moves. I'd love to see a Mary win if she somehow could do it. I just am not seeing it right now. But for me, my number seven is Mitch. I just think this week really tanked his game. Just like he's like literally told in confessional, he said like, I know you are watching at home thinking I should do a big move, but I don't trust these people. I don't want to do a big move. It's just kind of like a collective sigh, Ugh, if you could only just like actually see that you're on the bottom of this quote unquote new six alliance that you're in. There's clearly a top four within that. Camilla already knows that she's not going to be able to be in that top four. She's in the six. She knows that she was on the bottom of the six, which is good. She has that awareness. I don't think that Mitch has that awareness. He's just trying to look forward to getting to the next day, and he doesn't have really much planned ahead outside of that. And so I'm hoping that he could turn it around. I just really, really doubt it at this point, which is sad to talk about, but I think, he's been really great and entertaining. Like his story and stuff was really funny. Like on the episode when he was talking about like his running away from the dog. Um, that was a hilarious bit to have in there.
Mhm.
But it's just as far as winning the game, he's such a likable guy. Yeah, very charismatic, but he's done nothing in the game at all. It's just I'm not seeing really any game moves out of him. And so hopefully he can, pull something together. I definitely see him as a zero vote finalist at this point now. I just don't really see a strong chance for him to win.
I agree. And funny enough, my number six is Mitch. So I'll just piggyback off of you. I fully agree with what you're saying. I have him a tad higher just because he is in that alliance. I think like there's a chance that he becomes the GOAT and like gets to the end and maybe, his relationships get him a couple of votes or get him a little farther. Um, but I just don't see him winning. I just don't know what his end game is. You know what I mean? Where I think this episode was very detrimental to the fact that like this whole season he's talked about being aggressive and making this move, and when he had the opportunity, he didn't do it. And
Right.
so right in the wave. And I don't know. I don't see very much winner in him at the moment. He could definitely turn it around, but I think this was an episode of being like, hey, like someone else is going to win.
Like it's getting to the point where we have to do some sort of like Chris Underwood levels of turning it around,
Yeah,
to win. Like if you're one of these bottom players. So yeah, I totally agree with that. I have, Mary at six, so we just have those two swapped at the bottom there. But I think, very similarly, she also doesn't have a lot of chance to win. She hasn't really had the opportunity to do much in the game. She's proven herself pretty flexible, even though she was quite literally on the chopping block this week. Outside of Star being there. Like if Star wasn't there, she would have been gone. It was a toss up between them. So because she was almost voted out and she doesn't really have any allies at all in the game, I think she's not gonna win.
Hmm.
So that's for me. I'm married there.
Yeah. Who you got at number five?
Five, I have Joe, which is a little surprising probably, but I do think he tanked his game both last week and this week. I talked a little bit about it on the podcast last week, after episode 9 when David got voted out, but I do think we got to see a lot of, rumblings of, Joe not being able to win. I think Joe's gonna continue to, preach his honor and loyalty. Um, Bit as a way to convince everyone that he should win for that reason. And I think that David's going to make sure that that doesn't happen because, Joe still voted out David despite preaching honor and loyalty. And I think that's pretty direct contradiction. I don't know why I forgot that word for a second. And then I would also say that Joe won't own up to the fact that he did lie and deceive in the game, which I
Mhm.
think would also be a big downfall. And then we also saw that whole conversation with him and Mary, where he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm trying to get everyone to convince them to vote for me. I'm gonna make allies with everyone." And that just did not land on Mary at all. She was very quite literally against that. It just seemed like, okay, Joe's just telling me to vote for him at the end for 1 million. Like that's just not great gameplay. And so I just really don't see a lot from Joe at this point. He's definitely like I feel like the face of the season, you know, but I just don't really see a win coming for him just because I don't know. There's not a lot of game. He's just, sticking with this alliance going forward. Um, I don't know. I just don't see it. That's why I
I
have
think
David.
that's very fair, and I actually do agree with a lot of those points. I have reasoning for this. I have Camilla at five. Um, I think a lot of it is the fact that like I talked about it last episode of like I think she's arguably the best player, just not playing the best game. And again, it's not her fault. I think that she's on a season that like Kyle is the like talking point. Like Kyle's articulating their game. He's the one being like, I'm the social, she's the strategic. I bring to her the problems, she figures it out for me. Where it only like we're seeing constantly like Camilla's doing the dirty work. She's the one talking against David. She's the one talking against Joe, which is great, but it's also in the context of like being on the jury. You know what I mean? Like her whole game almost is set up for her to be on the jury and vote against these people. And so I don't see a world where she gets to the end without Kyle, I or Shaheen, which spoiler alert, they are very high on for me. And I think maybe her best bet is against Mitch and Mary, but I don't think anyone's going to allow that to happen. And I don't think she would want that to happen. I don't think that's what she wants to have. And so I don't see a world where she wins. I would love for her to win. I think like personally, her winning on a season full of like these big guys, I think would be an incredible story. I think would be just so fun, but I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I think there's, validity to that. I have a little bit higher, but who do you have at 4?
I have Joe.
Yeah,
Uh, I think
finally took him down a little bit.
Yeah, I'm still very high on Joe in a lot of ways, but I think this season, this episode really kind of put in perspective. I was kind of like a lot of people talked about jury management, and I thought that was going to be for David, and I thought like David would just somehow cruise to the end and just get no votes. But now I'm like that might be Joe. Because I think David's not voting for him. I don't think Mary was ever going to vote for him, but like now she's definitely not. Camilla's not going to vote for him. That's already 3 votes that are just like guaranteed not happening. And I do think he's going to make it to finale. I don't see a world where he doesn't. Because yeah, you have like someone like Shan who's like the faces of like 41 who gets taken out early, but I don't see that for Joe. I see Joe as like eventually going to give up his game for Eva, and that means that Eva gets out one step after. And at first I was like, I don't know if that really happens, but now I'm kind of on that train. I think Joe is actually a better player than what like I think he is a better player, like especially like making the season kind of revolve around his archetype is very impressive. But I think he's like Mike from 42 at this point. Like you said, I don't think he'll be able to articulate it,
Yeah.
especially people that like Kyle or Shaheen, like two people are really good at talking.
Sure.
Like
I don't think they'll
I
be
don't
able
think it
to,
happened.
yeah, I don't think they'll be able to, you know, convince the jury to win at that point, just with, his game versus other people's games. I agree with that point, just about
I
Colin
do.
Shane being able to talk well.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he won though. If like he won, I'd be like, that makes sense. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
that's fair.
Like, I'd be like, yeah. He probably just want to be like a great winner.
Yeah, I get that. I don't know. He'd probably seem like a Bob Crowley kind of win. I don't know. Um, I don't know how to compare him to other people right
Maybe
now.
like an maybe like an RS, maybe a little
Yeah, just pretty low key.
just
I,
like okay.
Tom Westman,
A lot of people compared it to Tom. Tom's
but
obviously a lot better at this point,
right, Tom was pretty dominant. I do think, Joe has a lot of slips though in his game, and he's super likable, but I don't think that translates to votes necessarily in the end.
but
But for me, my number four is Eva. I have her like pretty high compared to what I've had her in the past. I do think she's just, has a lot of firepower at this point in the game. And I do think Joe just had such a tank of the last couple episodes for me that I do think Eva now has a probably higher chance to win than Joe. And this is not pretty slight. It's not super strong chance still. I do think that my top three, especially top two, I feel like I are very cemented in that spot, and then everyone else is kind of in the obvious tier lower, with like, Mary and Mitch being in a even lower tier than that. But I have Eva here at four just because I think she's playing well, but she's not really done anything to, you know, make herself look like a individual compared to Joe. She hasn't separated herself from his game at all. She hasn't really pulled off any moves in particular. She's just kind of aligned with the right people at the right time. So I do think if she, you know, plays well with these advantages, and her idol as well, and is able to, talk well at the end. She also has a great story. We've seen that. I do think she could win. I'm still not seeing it. I'm not saying that she will win, but I do think she has a higher chance than the other people we've talked about.
yeah, I agree. And funny enough, my going into my third spot, I have Eva. I think like what you said, it's more like Joe falling for me than more Eva going up. But I think Eva's edit definitely like would be one of a winner. Like we kind of saw it with Rachel in 47. Like Rachel didn't really have much control over like who was going home when because Operation Italy happened and like all this different stuff. And but her confessionals were like, it doesn't matter what order they go as long as they get out. And they went out. And we kind of see with Eva, she's like, it doesn't really matter who goes as long as my core stays here. And like she was the one who ultimately pulled the trigger on David, not
Right.
Joe, and Joe got all the heat for it. So I'm definitely seeing the edit for it. She's been, honestly, the fact she's not targeted, I can't tell if it's like just social game because she's been shown to have a really good social game. But it's also, she has advantages. Like right now, she just played every advantage. She's guaranteed final five, like just back to back. She's in the final five, and I think like putting that in perspective kind of changes things as well. She could definitely get votes. I could see her getting votes over like a lot of people at this point. I think if Joe and Eva are there with like, I don't know, we'll just say Mitch, I think it's a pretty close vote between those two. And I do
Yeah.
think Eva would eventually like
Could
become
squeak it out, but it kind of depends. I do think that David being on the jury, Mary probably be being on the jury really tanks Joe's game, like, or takes votes for Joe away. I do think he'll still get a few, but I do think Eva could win in that scenario.
So who do you have number three?
My three is Camilla, which I bet you could probably guess that. I've had my top two for a long time now. Excuse me, but I have Camilla at three. I think, while she is being playing the dirty work side for Kyle, I do think that she can take that and make that her own game. I think she'd have to vote out Kyle to do so at the end. If she's in the end like as herself and has pulled off all these moves, as well as, just kind of throwing the game around a little bit. If she's sitting with Mary and Mitch, like that's an auto win for Camilla for me. If she's sitting with, Joe potentially, I think she can win in that scenario as well. I just think she has to have a couple moves on her resume, but we're getting down to the nitty gritty. We're down to the last three episodes of the season. She has to start doing moves now. The time is now. If she doesn't, I've no shot for her to win, but I do think she just has a better chance than most of the people on the season. Um, and I think she's playing great. Like her and Kyle's, relationship has been front and center. And I do think, while Joe's probably the face of the season and Joe and Eve are the more obvious duo, Kyle and Camilla are like the lifeblood of the season. They're driving everything, all the strategy, and that's been really fun to watch. So that's why I have Camilla at three.
Okay, well, let's get into the top two. Who do you have at number two?
My number two is Kyle, like I've had since when we did it for the final nine. I also have Kyle at two, just because, he's very similar to me with Camilla, but I do think he has a stronger chance to win just because he's been in that dominant position the whole time. And he's also probably in the best position to be able to create these moves. Camilla's more obviously on the bottom, so she doesn't really have as much leverage. But Kyle has relationships with pretty much everyone left, and so I think he's could be able to use that to push forward in the game. But I just feel like we've seen this narrative of him like, you know, being a little aggressive. I'd say aggressive, but just kind of like clumsy when he's, trying too hard. Like we saw at that opening challenge, against Justin or not against Justin. That was
Kyle, or not Kyle, Kevin.
yeah, with Kevin. And then I feel like we saw it somewhere else, but I feel like I noticed that again with the immunity challenge this week, with him like rushing through it and being, the hare instead of the tortoise, which I think caused him to lose that challenge. But I'm just saying, like, he might get a little bit flustered. Oh yeah, that's why. Because when they were trying to throw out Camilla's name, he got really flustered about that. I think in a final tribal council, if he's going against someone like Shaheen, I do think there's a really big chance that Kyle will get flustered and not really know how to promote his game as well. So that's why I have Shaheen at number one, and I can talk more about him later. But who do you have at number two?
I have Shaheen at number two, and this was, I mean, I think it's like A and B at this point. Um, I mean, you could still argue Eva or Joe for me, because I don't think if either of them won, it wouldn't be a surprise. But my thoughts with Shaheen are like a few things. I think he kind of set it up. He was like, if I remain in power, I will win this game. And I think if he ever loses power, that's it. Like if he's ever on the wrong side of the vote from this point on, it's kind of like you're not gonna win. Which he only has to like go through like maybe three more votes. And I think he probably will be on the right side of the votes. My thing is like just through his game and stuff, we have seen like him be wrong and like have like little moments where you're like, ooh, which isn't like a death nail or anything like that, but it's kind of like he said it's like my number one ally just got voted out in Thomas. Like at the time we were kind of like, oh, he was your number one. And we didn't get to see a lot of like him like think it through or anything. He kind of had to move forward. And I think little stuff like that, like him choosing Camilla and everyone kind of being sus of that. He's been targeted. I think there's like little things, but like I mean, realistically, he could be number one. I had to pick an order, and
It's fair.
I think in my head I have more reasoning to put my number one at one than I do Shaheen. But it's not because I don't think Shaheen will win. I think he has such a good edit where like he's getting credit when like he doesn't necessarily need it. He's like on shown how to do a blind side, stuff like that. Um, and he kind of put himself kind of away from all those muscular guys, and he kind of put himself more in the middle, and I kind of like that. But I think he'd be a fantastic winner. My number one, I think, is gonna win because I think his game is maybe a tad more secure in
Well,
my
yeah, go
mind.
ahead and jump into that.
All right, so obviously I have Kyle number one. Um, I think Kyle's gonna win for a few reasons. At this point in the game, we've seen that like he really is also like Joe at this point is like driven every like vote. Like it came down to him. This is the first episode that didn't happen. Shaheen got it, right? But Camilla like was protecting Kyle. And I think at this point in the game that like Kyle is like protected at like every angle. And he's done such a good job of like him himself playing the middle. Where like Camilla really only has the people on the bottom to work with. Kyle has both sides.
Right.
I think just from a sheer like game point without looking at the edit or anything, he's in the best position to win. I think he in Final Trouble, like he's an attorney. Like I think he'll be fine talking. Same with Shaheen, a debate professor. But I think if like those two went at it, it would be close. But if Kyle's against anyone else, like he's gonna outtalk him. And I think his moves have been more impressive. He did idle correctly and recovered. Things that are like explosive, but like people aren't really looking at him or targeting him.
Right.
And I think this was a good episode where he was like, "Hey, like I have blindsided everyone on the jury," which like, yeah, like you did, but so did everyone else. And he was like, "I'm not gonna do that." Like this episode, I'm gonna let Camilla do the dirty work, and then Joe wins immunity, and then Star goes home and he gets no blood on his hands. I think this was showing like Joe being bad at jury management and Kyle being good at it. And I think something like that really will eventually play out where we see next episode, Camilla's like, one of us has to, get to the end. And I believe in the merge episode, who was it? I think it was like Chrissy or someone was like, someone from our tribe is going to win $1 million. And I think that might have been foreshadowing that either Camilla or Kyle do it. And I'm hedging my bets on Kyle. I think he'd be a fantastic winner. I'd argue if he won the season the way he did, he'd be easily probably the best of the new era, in my opinion, just from like how insulated he was without where like Dee just had her group. I think he just like had everyone. And that's why I think he is, but like I there's such a chance like it all just crumbles. And he has to play this very well, but I think he can do it.
Yeah, I do think he's probably the best position in the game. But I know I've talked about this a bunch, but I have Shaheen at one just because I've talked about most of the points already on the
Number
podcast.
one
But
Shaheen supporter.
a number one Shaheen supporter. Just going back to a lot of earlier points, particularly with the edit, we had Chrissy say, "Better vote out Shaheen. He's a big threat to win. We should take a shot at him." I thought that was important for the story going forward. Just want to talk about the last 2 weeks in particular, just because I haven't really touched on that with, Shaheen's winner equity. I think that he's in a great position in the game. I do think, like Kyle, he has the ability to tap with both sides. And I do think he has, a stronger case to win because he's already seen as a strategic threat, that he already has that perception more than Kyle does. And so I think that people already have this, perception of him where they know like, Shiny's playing well. They already think that about him actively. He hasn't done, a ton, to show that, but everyone has that perception of him, and out there on Survivor, perception is reality, which is really important. So going forward, he definitely needs to separate himself. Each of these players need to separate themselves and have their own games to be able to make a case. But I do think Shaheen has the best chance of doing that, just because of where he's at in the game. Has the ability to play both sides, and I do think he, out of everyone else, would be the most willing to flip on his alliance if it came down to it. And so that's why I have Shaheen at one.
Hey, I think those are all valid points. I think at this point, either one of them I think would be like really fantastic winners and very fun winners. I can't really I mean it was really hard to choose to begin with, but I figured I should choose Kyle just because I know we'll put like a giant Shaheen like number one fan on your shirt. Um but I also love Shaheen. I think he's really funny. They've shown him be very social, so I can totally see him doing that. But either way, I think it's gonna probably come down to one of those two,
Yeah, I
unless
agree.
Joe wins like seven immunities. So
Exactly. Joe could just go on a tear, but hopefully that doesn't happen because I like to see some more dynamic gameplay for sure. But
I would as well.
yeah, for those who y'all were watching, please share your top seven. That'd be really fun to see in the comment section. And then also, if you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe and share with others. We're trying to build a fun Survivor community here. and just be able to talk about the show that we love. Even though we've had kind of a boring episode last week, we're just hoping that it goes back up, and we'll have a lot of fun here in the next couple seasons. You think we're ready to announce like some off-season stuff that we might be planning?
I think we should do it.
All right, for this summer, what we have planned right now is we're gonna do probably about a 4 episode winner rankings of every single winner of Survivor. Going through start, I think we'll probably do 12 at a time because we'll have 48 seasons to go off of and talk about a bunch of different winners and how they played. And then after that, we'll be jumping into at the very beginning at Survivor Borneo and talking about just doing a retrospective of each season, probably doing about 4 episodes per season on that, and that's probably going to be a weekly thing until we get back into all the season 49. We'll probably have some season 50 news at that point as well, so it'll be fun to talk
Definitely.
about that interspliced with that. So please be on the lookout for that. We're excited to continue to do that, keep this growing during the off season as well, so we don't lose viewers and continue to keep the engagement up for sure. So,
Absolutely.
all right. Well, thank you guys for watching. And we'll see you guys on Wednesday for episode 11.
All right. See ya.